On the morning of February 14, 2023, the quiet suburb of Riverside Oaks in Portland, Oregon, was shattered by a tragedy that would captivate the nation and raise profound questions about trust, manipulation, and the dark side of teenage relationships. Rebecca Mitchell, a 5-year-old nurse, returning from her night shift at St. Mary's Hospital, pulled into her driveway at 7:15 a.m. to find police cars surrounding her home and yellow crime scene tape cordoning off the property she shared with her husband and daughter. Detective James Rodriguez of the Portland Police Department met Rebecca at the edge of her driveway, his expression grave, as he prepared to deliver news that would irradiate her world. "Mrs. Mitchell, I need you to come with me. There's been an incident." Rebecca's hands trembled as she gripped her car keys, her mind racing through possibilities, none of them approaching the horrific reality she was about to learn. Inside the 2-story colonial home with its cheerful red door and white picket fence, Thomas Mitchell, Rebecca's 8-year-old husband and a beloved high school English teacher, lay dead in the master bedroom. He had been stabbed 17 times with a kitchen knife from the family's own butcher block. The attack so vicious that the medical examiner would later describe it as indicative of extreme rage or personal vendetta. The bedroom showed signs of a desperate struggle, furniture overturned, family photographs shattered on the floor, and defensive wounds on Thomas's hands, suggesting he had fought desperately for his life in his final moments. The investigation would eventually reveal that the person responsible for this brutal Valentine's Day murder was not a stranger or home invader, but Thomas and Rebecca's own daughter, 17-year-old Sarah Mitchell, a straight-A student, varsity soccer player, and by all external appearances, a model teenager who had never been in serious trouble. The case would expose a secret relationship with a 25-year-old graduate student, months of elaborate deception, and a level of premeditation that would shock even seasoned investigators accustomed to the darkest aspects of human behavior. Before we continue, please subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments what you think about this case. Your engagement helps us bring you more in-depth true crime stories. Now, let's continue with this devastating tale. The Mitchell family had been fixtures in the Riverside Oaks community for over 15 years, moving to the upscale Portland suburb when Sarah was just 2 years old. Thomas Mitchell taught English and creative writing at Lincoln High School, where he had earned a reputation as the teacher who could reach even the most reluctant students, making Shakespeare accessible and fostering a genuine love of literature in generations of teenagers who passed through his classroom. His colleagues described Thomas as passionate about education, but equally devoted to his family, often leaving school immediately after final bell to attend Sarah's soccer games or help with her college application essays. Thomas had published 2 novels in his 20s, modest literary successes that had earned critical praise but little commercial attention, and he spoke often of how teaching and fatherhood had become more fulfilling than his early dreams of literary fame. Rebecca Mitchell worked the night shift at St. Mary's Hospital, a schedule she had maintained since Sarah started middle school, reasoning that being home during the day allowed her to be present for her daughter's return from school and to maintain the household routines that kept their family functioning smoothly. Her co-workers in the cardiac unit described Rebecca as incredibly dedicated, the nurse you wanted present during a crisis, calm under pressure, and unfailingly competent. The irony that she possessed such professional composure while remaining completely blind to the crisis developing in her own home would haunt her in the years following her husband's murder. Sarah Mitchell appeared to be everything parents hoped for in a teenager. She maintained a 4 gigapascals while playing on the varsity soccer team, volunteering at a local animal shelter every Saturday, and serving as vice president of her school's environmental club. Teachers described her as conscientious and engaged, the student who always completed assignments on time and participated thoughtfully in class discussions. Her college counselor had written in her recommendation letters that Sarah Mitchell represented the ideal college applicant, academically excellent, socially engaged, and genuinely passionate about making the world a better place. The Mitchell home reflected this image of suburban perfection. The living room walls displayed family photos chronicling Sarah's progression from gap-toothed elementary schooler to poised high school senior, alongside framed certificates recognizing her academic achievements and accomplishments. The refrigerator was covered with soccer schedules, reminder notes in Rebecca's neat handwriting, and a calendar marking important family events, including the college tours they had planned for spring break. Neighbors described the Mitchells as friendly but private, the kind of family who kept their lawn immaculate, always waved hello, and occasionally hosted backyard barbecues where Thomas would discuss literature while grilling burgers, and Rebecca would ensure everyone had enough to eat. No one suspected the darkness growing beneath this carefully maintained exterior, the secret relationship that would eventually lead to murder, and the calculated deceptions that Sarah had been practicing for months. The relationship that would eventually lead to Thomas Mitchell's death began in September 2022, when Sarah met Marcus Chen, a 25-year-old graduate student in philosophy at Portland State University, at a coffee shop near campus where Sarah had gone with friends after a soccer match. Marcus, working on his dissertation about existentialism and moral responsibility, had struck up a conversation with Sarah about the book she was reading, Crime and Punishment, assigned in her AP Literature class. What began as an intellectual conversation about Dostoevsky and moral philosophy quickly evolved into something more as Marcus, who later claimed he had no idea Sarah was only 17, gave her his phone number and suggested they continue their discussion over coffee sometime. Text messages recovered during the investigation would reveal that Sarah had initially misrepresented her age, telling Marcus she was a freshman at Portland State taking advanced courses, a lie that Marcus claimed to have believed for several weeks before learning her true age. By October 2022, Sarah and Marcus had begun a romantic and sexual relationship that Sarah went to extraordinary lengths to conceal from her parents. She created elaborate cover stories about study groups, soccer practice extensions, and environmental club activities that allowed her to spend time with Marcus at his graduate student apartment across town. She configured her phone with hidden apps that disguised their communications and learned to delete her location history to prevent her parents from discovering her deceptions through the family's phone tracking service. The relationship intensified throughout the fall semester, with Sarah spending increasing amounts of time with Marcus, while her parents remained completely unaware of his existence. Marcus, who would later testify that he had fallen genuinely in love with Sarah, despite the age difference and legal implications, encouraged what he called her intellectual liberation from parental restrictions, suggesting that her parents' rules about dating and curfews were old-fashioned constraints that prevented her from becoming her authentic self. Text messages recovered from both Sarah's and Marcus's phones revealed a relationship dynamic that prosecutors would later characterize as grooming and manipulation, though Marcus maintained it had been genuine romance between intellectual equals. "Your parents don't understand you like I do," Marcus had written in one message. "They see you as their little girl, but I see the brilliant, complex woman you're becoming. You shouldn't have to hide who you are to make them comfortable." The turning point came in late January 2023, when Thomas Mitchell, suspicious of Sarah's increasing absences and emotional distance from her family, went through her laptop while she was at soccer practice. Despite Sarah's careful efforts to conceal her communications with Marcus, Thomas discovered a folder of photos showing Sarah and Marcus together, images that made clear the romantic nature of their relationship and Marcus's significantly older age. The confrontation that followed was explosive. According to text messages Sarah sent to Marcus immediately afterward, Thomas had been furious, calling Marcus a predator and Sarah irresponsible and naive. Thomas informed Sarah that he would be reporting Marcus to police for statutory rape. As Oregon law set the age of consent at 18, and Marcus's relationship with 17-year-old Sarah constituted a criminal offense, regardless of whether she had consented. "Dad said Marcus will go to prison for what we've done," Sarah texted Marcus on January 28th. "He says I've been groomed and manipulated and that I'm too young to understand what's happening. He won't listen to me. He says he's calling the police after he talks to Mom tonight. I can't let this happen. Marcus, I can't lose you." Marcus's response, recovered from his phone, would become a critical piece of evidence in the murder investigation. "Stay calm. Your dad is just scared because he's losing control of you. We need to think this through carefully. There has to be a way to make him understand, or at least to protect us both. Don't do anything impulsive. Let me think about our options." Despite Marcus's advice not to act impulsively, Sarah's subsequent internet search history suggested she was already considering more permanent solutions to her problem. Searches recovered from her laptop included: can police investigate if person who reports crime dies? How long does it take to delete text messages permanently? And most disturbingly, where to stab someone for quick death? February 14th, 2023, began normally for the Mitchell family, with no external indication of the violence that would erupt before dawn. Rebecca had left for her night shift at St. Mary's Hospital at 10:30 p.m. on February 13th, kissing both Thomas and Sarah goodbye and reminding Thomas about the Valentine's Day dinner reservation she had made for them at their favorite restaurant for the following evening, a tradition they had maintained throughout their 20-year marriage. Thomas and Sarah had spent the evening in careful civility, both aware of the confrontation that would occur when Rebecca returned home, and Thomas informed her about Sarah's relationship with Marcus and his intention to report Marcus to police. Sarah had claimed she needed to study for an AP chemistry exam, retreating to her room around 10 p.m. while Thomas graded essays in his home office, both occupying their separate spaces in the house, with the uncomfortable awareness that their family was about to be irrevocably changed. Security camera footage from a neighbor's home, which would become crucial evidence in the investigation, showed Sarah's bedroom light remaining on until approximately 11:45 p.m., then going dark for about 30 minutes before turning back on at 12:18 a.m. Cell phone records would later reveal that during this dark period, Sarah had received a phone call from Marcus lasting 14 minutes, a conversation that prosecutors would argue constituted the final planning session before the murder. At approximately 1:30 a.m. on Valentine's Day, Sarah Mitchell left her bedroom and walked down the hallway to her parents' master bedroom, carrying a 10-inch chef's knife she had taken from the kitchen butcher block. Thomas Mitchell was asleep, exhausted from a long day of teaching and grading, completely unaware that his daughter was standing in his bedroom doorway, struggling with the decision that would change both their lives forever. What happened next was reconstructed through physical evidence, blood spatter analysis, and eventually Sarah's own confession. The first stab wound, delivered to Thomas's back as he lay sleeping, woke him immediately. He rolled over to see his daughter standing over him with the knife, her face a mask that witnesses would later describe as eerily emotionless. Thomas attempted to defend himself, grabbing at Sarah's wrists and calling her name repeatedly, trying to talk her down from what she was doing. The bedroom quickly became a scene of chaos as Thomas fought desperately for his life. He managed to knock the knife from Sarah's hand at one point, but she retrieved it and continued her attack with what the medical examiner would describe as singular determination. Furniture was overturned as Thomas tried to escape. Family photos crashed to the floor, and Thomas's cries for help went unanswered in the empty house. The medical examiner's report would later detail 17 stab wounds, most concentrated in Thomas's chest and abdomen, with defensive wounds on his hands and forearms, indicating he had tried to shield himself from the blows. The final wound, delivered to Thomas's chest, had penetrated his heart, causing massive hemorrhaging and death within minutes. Blood spatter patterns on the walls and ceiling indicated that several wounds had struck major arteries, creating the spray patterns that would help investigators reconstruct the sequence of events. Sarah stood over her father's body for several minutes, according to her later testimony, watching him bleed out on the bedroom carpet while experiencing what she described as an odd disconnection from reality, as if she were watching events unfold from outside her own body. She then systematically attempted to clean up evidence of the crime, wiping the knife handle and doorknobs with bleach, changing out of her blood-soaked pajamas, and hiding them in the crawl space beneath the house. At 2:47 a.m., Sarah called 911 from her cell phone, her voice appropriately panicked as she reported that she had heard sounds of a struggle and found her father dead in his bedroom. "There's so much blood," she told the dispatcher, her voice breaking convincingly. "I think someone broke in. Please send help. I don't know if they're still in the house." The responding officers arrived within 6 minutes, finding Sarah sitting on the front porch in clean pajamas, wrapped in a blanket, and exhibiting all the signs of trauma one would expect from a teenager who had just discovered her father murdered. Her performance was convincing enough that she was initially treated as a victim and potential witness rather than a suspect, with officers focusing their initial investigation on the possibility of a home invasion. Detective James Rodriguez, a 22-year veteran of the Portland Police Department with extensive experience in homicide investigations, arrived at the Mitchell home at 3:15 a.m., immediately noting several inconsistencies that triggered his investigative instincts. The house showed no signs of forced entry. All windows and doors remained locked from the inside, and the security system had not been triggered, despite being armed when Thomas went to bed. The master bedroom presented a scene of extreme violence. Blood pooled on the carpet and splattered across walls and furniture in patterns suggesting a prolonged struggle. Thomas Mitchell's body lay on the floor beside the bed, his defensive wounds and the overturned furniture painting a picture of a man who had fought desperately for his life. The murder weapon, a chef's knife from the kitchen, had been placed in the kitchen sink, wiped clean of fingerprints, but still bearing traces of blood that would later be matched to Thomas through DNA analysis. Sarah's initial statement to Detective Rodriguez described hearing sounds of struggle around 2:30 a.m., waiting in her bedroom out of fear that an intruder might be in the house, then gathering courage to investigate and discovering her father's body. She claimed to have immediately retreated to the front porch to call 911, too frightened to remain inside the house with a potential killer. Her demeanor struck Rodriguez as oddly controlled for someone who had supposedly just discovered their father murdered, her tears seeming performative rather than genuine, though he noted this could simply be shock affecting her emotional responses. The detective's suspicions intensified when preliminary forensic analysis revealed blood traces on the bathroom sink in Sarah's personal bathroom, despite her claim of never entering the master bedroom after discovering her father's body. When questioned about this blood, Sarah explained that she had cut her finger while making a sandwich earlier in the evening, a claim that would later be contradicted by the DNA analysis, showing the blood belonged to Thomas, not Sarah. Forensic investigators processed the crime scene with meticulous care, photographing blood spatter patterns, collecting fiber samples, and documenting every detail of the bedroom's disarray. The position of Thomas's body and the pattern of blood on his hands suggested he had seen his attacker and tried to defend himself, raising questions about how an intruder could have surprised him in his sleep, yet ended up in a prolonged struggle. The breakthrough in the investigation came from an unexpected source: a Ring doorbell camera installed on the home of David Patterson, the Mitchells' next-door neighbor. Patterson mentioned to the canvassing officers that his doorbell camera had a wide-angle view that captured part of the Mitchells' driveway and front entrance. The footage, when reviewed by Detective Rodriguez, revealed something crucial. No one had entered or left the Mitchell home between 10:45 p.m., when the lights went out, and 2:47 a.m. when police arrived in response to Sarah's 911 call. This evidence directly contradicted Sarah's claim of a home invader and shifted the focus of the investigation from external perpetrators to household members. with Rebecca Mitchell confirmed to be at work during the murder through hospital security records and witness statements from colleagues. Only one person remained who had been present when Thomas was killed: his daughter Sarah. Detective Rodriguez obtained a warrant to search Sarah's phone and computer, discovering the deleted text messages with Marcus Chen that revealed both motive and premeditation. The messages painted a picture of a teenager desperate to prevent her father from reporting her boyfriend to police, explicitly discussing her fear that Marcus would be arrested and that their relationship would be ended by parental intervention. Most damning were Sarah's internet searches in the days leading up to the murder, queries that demonstrated clear premeditation. Minimum sentence for statutory rape in Oregon: can minor testify against parents' wishes, how to make murder look like robbery, and cleaning blood from carpet. These searches, combined with the lack of any evidence of an intruder, transformed Sarah from victim to prime suspect. On February 16th, 2 days after the murder, Detective Rodriguez brought Sarah Mitchell in for formal questioning, informing her that she was now considered a suspect rather than a witness. Sarah's mother, Rebecca, devastated by her husband's murder and struggling to accept that her daughter might be responsible, sat in the observation room with a victim's advocate, watching through one-way glass as Rodriguez prepared to interrogate the teenager. The interview room at the Portland Police Department was deliberately austere: concrete walls, a metal table bolted to the floor, uncomfortable plastic chairs, and a video camera in the corner recording every word and gesture. Sarah sat with remarkable composure for someone facing potential murder charges, her hands folded on the table before her and her expression neutral as Rodriguez explained her rights. The detective began with open-ended questions about Sarah's relationship with her father, gradually working toward the events of February 13th and 14th. Sarah maintained her story about hearing sounds of struggle and discovering her father's body, her narrative consistent with her initial statement, but delivered with an emotional flatness that Rodriguez found increasingly suspicious. When Rodriguez presented evidence contradicting her account, the Ring camera footage showing no one entering or leaving the house, the blood in her bathroom belonging to Thomas rather than resulting from a cut finger, and the deleted text messages discussing her fear about Marcus being reported to police, Sarah's composure began to crack. Her explanations became more elaborate and less plausible, each new piece of evidence requiring increasingly unlikely alternative interpretations. The pivotal moment came when Rodriguez placed printouts of Sarah's internet searches on the table, the queries about murder, blood cleaning, and legal penalties staring up at her in her own search history. "Sarah, I think you love Marcus very much," Rodriguez said, his tone conversational rather than accusatory. "I think you were terrified of losing him, of him going to prison because of your relationship. I think your father left you feeling like you had no choice." For several long moments, Sarah stared at the search history printouts, her composure finally collapsing as tears began streaming down her face. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. He wasn't going to listen. Dad had already made up his mind to destroy everything. He said Marcus was a predator, but Marcus is the only person who's ever really understood me. Dad was going to take that away. What followed was a confession that would form the cornerstone of the prosecution's case. Sarah described how Marcus had called her around midnight on February 13th, discussing their limited options and mentioning that her father's determination to report Marcus to police would end once he spoke with Rebecca the following day. Though Marcus later denied suggesting violence, Sarah testified that she had interpreted his comments about permanent solutions and eliminating the threat as tacit encouragement to take extreme action. Sarah detailed retrieving the kitchen knife, standing in her father's doorway, working up the courage to attack, and the brutal struggle that followed. "I thought it would be quick," she said, her voice detached as if describing events that had happened to someone else. "I thought one stab would be enough, and he'd just go to sleep. But he woke up, and he fought back, and he kept saying my name. asking why I was doing this. I couldn't stop. If I stopped, he'd call the police and Marcus would go to prison. The confession included details that hadn't been released publicly, lending credibility to Sarah's account. She described exactly where she had hidden her blood-stained pajamas in the crawlspace, the specific bleach solution she had used to clean surfaces, and her detailed plan to claim a home invasion, complete with a false timeline of events she had rehearsed before calling 911. When asked if she felt remorse for killing her father, Sarah's response chilled everyone in the interview room. "I feel bad that it had to happen, but Dad didn't give me any other choice. He was going to ruin Marcus's life and destroy our relationship. What was I supposed to do?" This inability to express genuine remorse or accept responsibility for choosing violence would become a central issue throughout the subsequent trial and sentencing, with prosecutors arguing it demonstrated a fundamental lack of empathy that warranted maximum punishment despite Sarah's age. District Attorney Patricia Morrison, a 30-year veteran prosecutor known for her methodical approach to complex cases, took personal charge of the prosecution, recognizing that the case against Sarah Mitchell raised significant questions about juvenile culpability, parental authority, and the manipulation of teenagers by older partners. Morrison's strategy focused on demonstrating that Sarah's actions reflected calculated premeditation rather than impulsive violence, making her eligible for adult prosecution despite being only 17 at the time of the murder. The forensic evidence painted a devastating picture of premeditated violence. Blood spatter analyst Dr. Kevin Thompson testified that the pattern of blood on the walls and ceiling indicated at least 17 separate strikes with the knife, with distinct pause points between clusters of wounds, suggesting the attack had been carried out with deliberate intent rather than frenzied panic. The defensive wounds on Thomas's hands and arms demonstrated he had been awake and fighting for his life, contradicting any suggestion that the violence had been quick or merciful. DNA evidence recovered from under Thomas's fingernails matched Sarah's genetic profile, indicating he had scratched his attacker during the struggle, another piece of physical evidence connecting her directly to the crime. The blood found in Sarah's bathroom sink, which she had attempted to clean, was conclusively identified as Thomas's through DNA analysis, contradicting her claim about cutting her own finger and establishing that she had engaged in cleanup activities after the murder. The digital forensics proved equally damning. Dr. Lisa Chen, a specialist in recovering deleted data, testified about retrieving Sarah's internet searches spanning 3 weeks before the murder. The progression of searches told a story of escalating desperation and planning. Early searches about legal penalties for statutory rape in Oregon, followed by queries about how police investigations worked, and culminating in specific searches about murder methods, crime scene staging, and evidence disposal. The search history shows clear progression, from research about legal consequences to active planning of a violent solution. Dr. Chen testified. The defendant searched for information about vital organs, effective knife techniques, and methods of cleaning blood evidence. This wasn't curiosity about crime in general. These were targeted searches designed to solve a specific problem. Text messages between Sarah and Marcus became a focal point of the prosecution's motive argument. While the messages didn't explicitly discuss murder plans, they revealed Sarah's escalating panic about her father's intention to report Marcus to police, and Marcus's encouragement of what he called her liberation from parental control. Prosecutors argued that Marcus had created a psychological environment where Sarah felt that protecting their relationship justified extreme measures, even if he hadn't explicitly ordered the murder. Marcus Chen groomed this teenager into believing their relationship was more important than her family, her future, even her father's life, Morrison argued in her opening statement. But regardless of his manipulation, Sarah Mitchell made a choice. She chose to take a knife from the kitchen drawer, enter her father's bedroom, and stab him 17 times while he begged for his life. That choice demonstrates the kind of calculation and intent that warrants prosecution as an adult. The defense, led by public defender Michael Torres, faced the difficult task of arguing diminished capacity without denying Sarah's basic culpability for the murder. Torres's strategy emphasized Sarah's age, her susceptibility to manipulation by an older boyfriend, and her underdeveloped capacity for impulse, techniques, and methods of cleaning blood evidence. This wasn't curiosity about crime in general. These were targeted searches designed to solve a specific problem. Text messages between Sarah and Marcus became a focal point of the prosecution's motive argument. While the messages didn't explicitly discuss murder plans, they revealed Sarah's escalating panic about her father's intention to report Marcus to police, and Marcus's encouragement of what he called her liberation from parental control. Prosecutors argued that Marcus had created a psychological environment where Sarah felt that protecting their relationship justified extreme measures, even if he hadn't explicitly ordered the murder. Marcus Chen groomed this teenager into believing their relationship was more important than her family, her future, even her father's life, Morrison argued in her opening statement. But regardless of his manipulation, Sarah Mitchell made a choice. She chose to take a knife from the kitchen drawer, enter her father's bedroom, and stab him 17 times while he begged for his life. That choice demonstrates the kind of calculation and intent that warrants prosecution as an adult. The defense, led by public defender Michael Torres, faced the difficult task of arguing diminished capacity without denying Sarah's basic culpability for the murder. Torres's strategy emphasized Sarah's age, her susceptibility to manipulation by an older boyfriend, and her underdeveloped capacity for impulse control and long-term decision-making, all factors that he argued should mitigate her responsibility and preclude adult prosecution. Expert testimony from developmental psychologist Dr. Amanda Foster formed the cornerstone of the defense's case. Dr. Foster explained that adolescent brains, particularly the prefrontal cortex responsible for impulse control and consequence assessment, don't fully mature until the mid-20s. She testified that 17-year-olds, despite appearing physically mature and capable of sophisticated reasoning in some contexts, remain fundamentally different from adults in their vulnerability to peer pressure, emotional volatility, and inability to fully appreciate long-term consequences. Sarah Mitchell's brain was still developing the capacity to resist emotional impulses and evaluate risks rationally, Dr. Foster testified. When you combine this developmental vulnerability with the psychological manipulation by an adult partner who exploited her emotional dependency, you create circumstances where a teenager might make a catastrophic decision she would never make as a mature adult. Dr. Foster's testimony was challenged during cross-examination by Morrison, who presented Sarah's elaborate planning, her systematic internet research spanning weeks, and her successful concealment of both her relationship with Marcus and her murder plot as evidence of sophisticated reasoning inconsistent with claims of developmental immaturity. If Sarah's brain was so underdeveloped, how did she successfully maintain a secret relationship for months, create elaborate cover stories, and plan a murder with enough sophistication to nearly succeed in making it look like a home invasion? Morrison asked. The evidence shows calculated, sustained decision-making over an extended period, not impulsive action by a child incapable of understanding consequences. The medical examiner's testimony provided some of the most emotionally difficult moments of the trial. Dr. Robert Singh described Thomas Mitchell's wounds in clinical detail, noting that many of the 17 stab wounds had been delivered with enough force to penetrate completely through the body, indicating the level of violence Sarah had employed. He testified that Thomas would have remained conscious for several minutes during the attack, aware of what was happening and struggling to survive. The defensive wounds on Mr. Mitchell's hands and forearms indicate he was attempting to grab the blade to stop the attack, Dr. Singh explained. The distribution of wounds across his chest and abdomen suggests the attacker continued striking even after incapacitating injuries had been inflicted. This was not a quick death. Mr. Mitchell suffered terribly in his final minutes. This testimony devastated Rebecca Mitchell, who had aged visibly since her husband's murder and now sat in the courtroom gallery with her sister, no longer able to support the daughter accused of killing her husband. Rebecca had initially defended Sarah, insisting there must be some explanation that didn't involve her daughter committing such violence, but the mounting evidence had gradually eroded her denial until she was forced to accept the unthinkable truth. The trial of State of Oregon versus Sarah Mitchell commenced on the 18th of September 2023, 7 months after Thomas Mitchell's murder in the Multnomah County Circuit Court. Judge Robert Harrison, known for his careful consideration of juvenile cases and his insistence on rigorous adherence to legal procedure, presided over the proceedings with the awareness that the case would likely influence juvenile justice policy far beyond Portland. The courtroom was packed with media representatives, legal observers interested in the juvenile prosecution issues, and community members who had known the Mitchell family or been affected by Thomas's teaching. Sarah sat at the defense table in conservative clothing, carefully chosen to emphasize her youth. Her hair pulled back and minimal makeup applied, the defense team's strategy to present her as a child rather than a calculating killer. Jury selection had been contentious, with both prosecution and defense teams carefully evaluating potential jurors' attitudes toward juvenile prosecution, statutory rape laws, and parental authority. The final jury of 8 women and 4 men ranged in age from 28 to 67, including 2 high school teachers, a social worker, and a retired police officer, representing a cross-section of Portland's diverse community. Prosecutor Patricia Morrison's opening statement laid out the state's case with methodical precision, using the courtroom's large screens to display the timeline of Sarah's actions, her internet searches, and the text messages revealing her motive. Morrison emphasized that while Sarah's age was relevant to sentencing considerations, it didn't excuse her choice to commit premeditated murder rather than accept restrictions on an inappropriate relationship. Sarah Mitchell was 17 years old, not 7, Morrison told the jury. She understood that murder was wrong. She understood that what she was planning would kill her father. And she did it anyway, because she valued her relationship with an adult man who was exploiting her more than she valued her father's life. That's not diminished capacity. That's a calculated, selfish choice that warrants adult consequences. The defense's opening statement, delivered by Michael Torres with carefully calibrated emotion, reframed Sarah's actions within the context of Marcus Chen's grooming and manipulation. Torres described Sarah as a victim herself, a talented teenager with a bright future who had been targeted by a predatory older man who exploited her emotional vulnerability and developmental immaturity to serve his own interests. Marcus Chen created a psychological prison for Sarah Mitchell, Torres argued. He isolated her from her family, convinced her that their relationship was the most important thing in her life, and created a situation where she felt she had to protect him at any cost. What happened on Valentine's Day was not the calculated act of a criminal mind. It was the desperate act of a manipulated child who couldn't see any other way to protect someone she had been groomed to believe she loved. The first week of testimony focused on establishing the facts of the murder through law enforcement witnesses, forensic experts, and medical testimony. Detective Rodriguez described the initial investigation, the discovery of inconsistencies in Sarah's account, and the evidence that had led investigators to focus on her as the perpetrator. His testimony was matter-of-fact and unemotional, allowing the evidence itself to tell the story without dramatic embellishment. The Ring camera footage became a central piece of evidence, played repeatedly for the jury to demonstrate conclusively that no one had entered or exited the Mitchell home during the relevant time period. The video's timestamp and metadata were verified by a digital forensics expert, eliminating any possibility of manipulation or error. This evidence effectively destroyed Sarah's initial claim of a home invasion, forcing the defense to pivot entirely to arguing diminished capacity rather than denying basic culpability. Marcus Chen's testimony, which the defense had fought unsuccessfully to exclude, provided crucial insight into his relationship with Sarah. Was 18 when they began their relationship and had been horrified when he later learned her true age. When Sarah told me she was 17, not 18, I immediately suggested we stop seeing each other until she graduated. Marcus testified, a claim contradicted by text messages showing their relationship had continued and intensified after this supposed revelation. I never suggested she should harm her father. When she texted about her father threatening to call police, I told her to stay calm and we'd figure things out legally. During cross-examination, Morrison systematically dismantled Marcus's claims of innocence, presenting text messages where he had encouraged Sarah to defy her parents, criticized Thomas Mitchell's controlling behavior, and discussed the threat that Thomas's police report would pose to their future together. While the messages never explicitly mentioned violence, Morrison argued they created a context where Sarah felt justified in taking extreme action to protect their relationship. You told Sarah that her father was trying to destroy her happiness, didn't you? Morrison asked, displaying a text message on screen. I was supporting her emotionally, Marcus replied defensively. You told her that sometimes people have to make difficult choices to protect what matters most? I meant legal choices, talking to a lawyer, things like that. But you never clarified that, did you? You left it ambiguous whether you were endorsing illegal action. Marcus's inability to provide convincing answers to these questions undermined his claims of innocence in the murder plot, though insufficient evidence existed to charge him as an accessory. His testimony did, however, support the prosecution's argument that Sarah had been motivated by fear of losing him rather than acting in self-defense or under duress, making the murder premeditated rather than impulsive. The most emotionally devastating testimony came from Rebecca Mitchell, who had struggled for months with conflicting loyalties between her murdered husband and her daughter accused of killing him. Rebecca described Thomas as a devoted father and husband, someone who had reorganized his career and life to prioritize family, and whose discovery of Sarah's relationship with Marcus had been motivated by genuine concern for his daughter's welfare rather than desire to control her. Tom loved Sarah more than anything, Rebecca testified, tears streaming down her face. When he found those pictures on her computer, he was devastated, not angry. He kept saying, "She's just a baby, Becca. This man is taking advantage of our little girl." He wanted to protect her, not punish her. He would never have reported Marcus to police if Sarah had just ended the relationship and accepted appropriate counseling. When asked about Sarah's behavior in the weeks before the murder, Rebecca described changes she had attributed to normal teenage development, but now recognized as signs of something darker. Sarah had become secretive and irritable, spending long hours alone in her room and becoming defensive when asked about her activities. Rebecca had dismissed her husband's concerns as overprotectiveness, a decision she now deeply regretted. If I had listened to Tom, if I had taken his concerns seriously instead of dismissing them, he might still be alive, Rebecca said, her voice breaking. I was working nights, trying to provide for our family, and I missed what was happening right in front of me. My daughter was planning to murder her father, and I saw nothing. The jury visibly struggled with Rebecca's testimony, several members wiping away tears as they watched a mother grapple with the impossible reality that her daughter had killed her husband. The human cost of the crime became undeniable in that moment, transforming abstract legal arguments into the concrete devastation of a family destroyed. If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a like. Your one like motivates us to bring you even more powerful stories. And if you enjoy real-life stories, mysterious deaths, and tales based on true events, then make sure to subscribe to the channel. Also, hit the bell icon so whenever we bring a new story, you're the first one to know. See you in the next video with another true and deeply moving story. Until then, take care and stay close to the truth.